As a retired orthopedic surgeon, I thought I had seen it all. The broken bones, the shattered lives, the long and painful roads to recovery. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I discovered that my own son, the boy I had raised to follow in my footsteps, was using my name and reputation to fuel his addiction to prescription drugs. Betrayal, anger, and a grim determination to set things right. These were the emotions that fueled me as I embarked on the most difficult battle of my life. Not in the operating room, but in the courtroom and the halls of the medical board. This was a fight for my legacy, my integrity, and the very soul of the profession I had dedicated my life to. And I knew that I would stop at nothing to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The sun was just starting to peek through the curtains of my study when I heard the phone ring. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. 7 a.m. Who could be calling at this hour? I picked up the receiver, my voice still rough with sleep. Hello? Dr. Simmons? The voice on the other end was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. This is Dr. Patel from the State Medical Board. I apologize for the early call, but I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. I sat up straighter in my chair, my heart starting to pound. The medical board. What could they possibly want with me? I had retired from practice 5 years ago, my license in good standing, and my reputation untarnished. Of course, Dr. Patel. What seems to be the problem? I kept my voice steady, trying to quell the rising sense of unease in my gut. There was a pause on the other end, a shuffling of papers. Dr. Simmons, we've received several reports of fraudulent prescriptions being written in your name. High doses of opioids, benzodiazepines, and other controlled substances. All of them authorized using your DEA number and electronic signature. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach, the air rushing out of my lungs in a harsh exhale. Fraudulent prescriptions? In my name? How was that possible? There must be some mistake, I managed, my voice shaking slightly. I haven't written a prescription in over 5 years, not since I retired. And I certainly haven't authorized anyone else to use my credentials. Dr. Patel sighed, his tone sympathetic but firm. I understand your confusion, Dr. Simmons, but the evidence is quite clear. These prescriptions have been traced back to a single source, a Dr. James Simmons, practicing out of a clinic in downtown Chicago. James, my son, the boy I had raised to follow in my footsteps, to uphold the sacred oath of our profession. The young man who had always been a little too charming, a little too eager to take shortcuts and bend the rules. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. This couldn't be happening. Not to me, not to my family. We were the Simmons, a dynasty of doctors stretching back 3 generations. Our name was synonymous with integrity, with excellence, with the highest standards of patient care. And now, that name was being dragged through the mud, tarnished by the actions of my own flesh and blood. Dr. Patel, I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. I don't know what to say. This is a complete shock to me. I had no idea that James was involved in anything like this. I understand, Dr. Simmons, and I want you to know that the board is not holding you personally responsible for your son's actions. But we do need your cooperation in our investigation to help us get to the bottom of this and ensure that no further harm is done to patients or to the integrity of our profession. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Of course, I'll do whatever I can to help. Just tell me what you need from me. We spent the next hour going over the details of the case, the evidence that had been gathered, and the steps that would be taken to investigate and prosecute those responsible. By the time I hung up the phone, my head was spinning with information and my heart was heavy with dread. James, my own son, involved in something like this? It was like a nightmare come to life, a betrayal so deep and so personal that I could barely wrap my mind around it. But even as the shock and the hurt washed over me, I felt a flicker of something else stirring in my chest. Anger, hot and bright and righteous. Anger at James for throwing away everything I had worked so hard to build, for tarnishing our family name and the legacy of our profession. And beneath that anger, a grim determination, a resolve to set things right, to root out the corruption and the deceit that had taken hold in my own house. I may have been retired from medicine, but I was far from powerless. I had connections, influence, a lifetime of goodwill and respect earned through hard work and dedication. And I would use every last ounce of that power to bring my son to justice, to restore the honor and the integrity of the Simmons name. No matter the cost, no matter the personal toll, this was a fight I could not afford to lose. With a heavy sigh, I pushed myself up from my desk and made my way to the kitchen, where my wife Eleanor was already bustling about, making coffee and toast. She looked up as I entered, her eyes widening at the sight of my haggard face. "Clark, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I shook my head, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. "Not a ghost, Ellie. Something much, much worse." And as the morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room, I began to tell her the story of our son's betrayal and the battle that lay ahead, a battle for the soul of our family and for the very future of the profession to which I had dedicated my life. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, meetings, and sleepless nights. I worked closely with Dr. Patel and the medical board, providing them with all the information and assistance they needed to build their case against James. It was a surreal experience, sitting in those sterile conference rooms and fluorescent-lit offices, poring over the evidence of my own son's misdeeds, prescription records, patient charts, bank statements, all of it painting a picture of greed, deceit, and reckless disregard for human life. I felt like I was in a daze, moving through the motions of the investigation, while my mind reeled with questions and doubts. How could James have done this? What had driven him to such desperation, such moral bankruptcy? Had I missed the signs, been too blind or too trusting to see the darkness lurking beneath the surface of my own child? Eleanor was a rock throughout it all, standing by my side with a strength and grace that left me in awe. She held me when I wept, listened patiently when I ranted and raged, and offered quiet words of wisdom when I was at my lowest points. "We'll get through this, Clark," she would say, her hand warm and steady on my shoulder. "We've faced harder things before, and we've always come out stronger. This is just another storm to weather, another mountain to climb." I wished I could share her certainty, her unshakable faith in the goodness of the world and the resilience of the human spirit. But with each passing day, each new revelation of James's wrongdoing, I felt that faith slipping away, replaced by a gnawing sense of despair and betrayal. And then, a week after that first fateful phone call, the hammer finally fell. I was in my study, going over some old patient files and trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythms of medical research, when Eleanor knocked on the door. "Clark," she said softly, her face pale and drawn. "There's someone here to see you. It's James." I felt my blood run cold, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. James, here, now, after everything he had done, everything he had put us through? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Send him in," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. A moment later, James stepped into the room, his head held high and his eyes flashing with defiance. He looked thinner than the last time I had seen him, his face gaunt and his skin sallow. But there was no hint of remorse or shame in his expression, no sign of the guilt and regret that should have been eating away at his soul. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "It's good to see you. I've been meaning to come by, to talk about everything that's been going on." I stared at him, my jaw clenched so tight I could feel my teeth grinding together. "Everything that's been going on?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "Is that what you call it, James? The lies, the deceit, the reckless endangerment of innocent lives?" He had the gall to look surprised, his eyebrows rising in mock confusion. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. There must be some misunderstanding, some mistake." "Mistake?" I slammed my hand down on the desk, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. "The only mistake here was mine, James. The mistake of trusting you, of believing that you would uphold the values and the principles that this family holds dear." I stood up, my body trembling with barely contained rage. "I know everything, James. The prescriptions, the kickbacks, the sham clinic you've been running downtown. Did you really think you could get away with it? Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" For a moment, he just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. And then, to my shock and horror, he started to laugh. "Oh, Dad," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You always were so naive, so trusting. You think the world is all black and white, right and wrong? But the truth is, it's all just shades of gray." He leaned forward, his eyes glittering with a cold, hard light. "Do you have any idea how much money there is to be made in pain management these days? How easy it is to find patients desperate for a fix, willing to pay anything for a little relief?" I felt sick to my stomach, my vision swimming with disgust and disbelief. "These are people's lives you're talking about, James. People who came to you for help, for healing. And you exploited them, fed their addictions, and lined your pockets with their suffering." He shrugged, his lips twisting into a sneer. "It's just business, Dad. Supply and demand. And besides, who are you to judge me? You think your hands are so clean, your conscience so clear?" I recoiled as if he had struck me, my breath catching in my throat. "What are you talking about?" He laughed again, a harsh, brittle sound. "Come on, Dad. You think I don't know about the corners you cut, the risks you took, the malpractice suits you settled out of court, the patients you lost on the operating table?" I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "Those were mistakes, James. Tragic, awful mistakes that I will regret for the rest of my life. But I never set out to harm anyone, to profit from their pain. What you've done, it's unforgivable." His face hardened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Unforgivable? You sanctimonious old fool. You think you can sit there in judgment of me after everything you've done? After the way you pushed me, pressured me to follow in your footsteps, to live up to the almighty Simmons legacy?" He stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "Well, guess what, Dad? I'm done trying to be you. I'm done living in your shadow, playing by your rules. From now on, I'm doing things my way, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." And with that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him with a force that shook the walls. I sat there for a long moment, my body numb and my mind reeling. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, like the ground had opened up beneath my feet and swallowed me whole. James, my own son, so lost and broken that he would resort to such depths of depravity. And for what? Money? Power? Some twisted sense of rebellion against the father he felt had wronged him? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my failures pressing down on me like a physical burden. Had I been too hard on him, too demanding? Had I driven him to this, with my expectations and my ego and my unyielding pursuit of perfection? No. I shook my head, my jaw clenching with renewed determination. I could not take the blame for this, could not shoulder the guilt of my son's choices. He was a grown man, responsible for his own actions and his own conscience, and I would not let him drag me down with him, would not let him tarnish the legacy of our family and our profession any further. I picked up the phone, my fingers steady and sure as I dialed Dr. Patel's number. It was time to take this to the next level, to bring the full weight of the law and the medical establishment crashing down on James and his sham operation. He may have been my son, my flesh and blood, but he was also a criminal, a disgrace to the oath we had both sworn to uphold. And I would not rest until he was brought to justice, until the Simmons name was cleansed of the stain he had left upon it. No matter how much it broke my heart, no matter how much it cost me in the end. This was a war I had no choice but to fight, and I would not stop until I had won. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity and emotion, as the investigation into James's clinic kicked into high gear. Dr. Patel and his team worked tirelessly to gather evidence, interviewing patients and staff, poring over financial records and prescription logs. And with each new revelation, each sordid detail that came to light, I felt my heart sink deeper into despair. The scope of James's operation was far greater than any of us had imagined, a vast network of corruption and greed that stretched across the city and beyond. He had been running pill mills out of multiple locations, using a rotating cast of shady doctors and complicit pharmacists to churn out opioids and benzodiazepines like candy. He had targeted the most vulnerable populations, the poor, the elderly, the chronically ill, preying on their desperation and their trust in the medical system. And he had been raking in millions of dollars in the process, living a life of luxury and excess, while his patients suffered and died in the grip of addiction. It was a betrayal so profound, so utterly reprehensible, that I could barely wrap my mind around it. How could my own son, the boy I had raised with love and care and the highest of expectations, have fallen so far from grace? I spent long hours in my study, poring over old photo albums and home movies, searching for some clue, some hint of the darkness that had taken root in James's soul. I watched him grow from a chubby, smiling infant to a serious, driven young man, his eyes always fixed on the horizon, his mind always racing towards the next challenge, the next achievement. Had I missed something? Some crucial moment when I could have intervened, could have steered him back towards the light? Had I been too focused on my own career, my own ambitions, to see the warning signs that must have been there all along? Eleanor tried to comfort me, to assure me that none of this was my fault. "You did everything you could, Clark," she would say, her hand soft and warm on my cheek. "You were a wonderful father, a shining example of integrity and compassion. James made his own choices, his own mistakes. You can't blame yourself for that." But the guilt gnawed at me like a cancer, eating away at my sense of self and purpose. I had devoted my life to healing, to easing suffering, and promoting wellness. And now, my own flesh and blood had taken those same skills and twisted them into something monstrous, something that brought only pain and destruction. I knew that I had to do something, had to find a way to make this right. And so, with a heavy heart and a sense of grim determination, I made a decision that would change the course of my life forever. I called Dr. Patel and arranged a meeting, my voice steady and sure as I laid out my plan. "I want to testify," I said, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "I want to tell the world what James has done, and I want to make sure that he never has the chance to do it again." Dr. Patel looked at me with a mixture of surprise and respect, his eyes searching my face for any sign of hesitation or doubt. "Dr. Simmons, are you sure about this?" he asked gently. "Testifying against your own son, it won't be easy. The media attention, the public scrutiny, it could be brutal." I nodded, my jaw clenched with resolve. "I know, but I have to do this, Dr. Patel, for the patients who suffered, for the families who lost loved ones, for the integrity of our profession, and for the sake of my own conscience." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I understand. And I want you to know that the board will stand behind you every step of the way. We'll provide you with legal counsel, with media training, with whatever support you need to get through this." I smiled, feeling a flicker of hope and gratitude amidst the darkness. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. That means more to me than you can imagine." And so, with a sense of purpose and determination that I hadn't felt in years, I threw myself into the task at hand. I worked with the board's legal team to prepare my testimony, to gather the evidence and the anecdotes that would paint a vivid picture of James's misdeeds and their devastating impact on the lives of his patients. I reached out to old colleagues and friends in the medical community, rallying them to my cause and urging them to speak out against the scourge of prescription drug abuse. I gave interviews to the press, my voice shaking with emotion as I described the heartbreak and the horror of what my son had done. And through it all, I clung to the hope that somehow, some way, I could make a difference. That by shining a light on the darkness, by standing up for what was right and just, I could begin to atone for the sins of my family and my profession. It wasn't easy, of course. The media attention was relentless, the public reaction often cruel and judgmental. There were those who accused me of being a bad father, a hypocrite, a man who had driven his own son to ruin with his impossible standards and his unrelenting pursuit of perfection. But I refused to let their words deter me, refused to let their doubts and their criticisms shake my resolve. I knew in my heart that I was doing the right thing, that I was fighting for something bigger than myself or my family name. And so, on the day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom with my head held high and my heart full of righteous anger. I took the stand and told my story, my voice ringing out with the force of truth and the weight of hard-earned wisdom. I spoke of my love for my son and of the dreams I had once held for his future. I spoke of the patients whose lives he had destroyed, of the families he had torn apart with his greed and his callousness. I spoke of the sacred trust that we as doctors held, and of the devastating consequences when that trust was betrayed. And as I spoke, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose that I had never known before. I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. I was a healer, a guardian, a man who had dedicated his life to the service of others. And I would not rest until that legacy was restored, until the stain of my son's betrayal was wiped clean from the annals of medical history. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard I had to fight, this was my calling, my mission, my solemn duty, and I would see it through to the end, come what may. The fallout from my testimony was swift and brutal. Within hours of leaving the courtroom, my face was plastered across every news channel and newspaper in the city, my words dissected and debated by pundits and commentators from all sides of the political spectrum. Some hailed me as a hero, a brave whistleblower who had risked everything to expose the rot at the heart of the medical system. Others condemned me as a traitor, a man who had turned his back on his own flesh and blood for the sake of his own ego and ambition. But I tried to tune out the noise, to focus on the task at hand and the people who mattered most. Eleanor was my rock, my constant source of strength and support. She held me when I wept, listened patiently when I raged against the injustice of it all, and reminded me every day of the goodness and the light that still existed in the world. My colleagues at the hospital rallied around me, offering words of encouragement and gestures of solidarity. They knew better than anyone the toll that this kind of scandal could take on a doctor's reputation and livelihood, and they were determined to stand by me through thick and thin. But even as I drew strength from their support, I knew that the hardest part of this journey was still ahead of me. James's trial was fast approaching, and I would once again be called upon to testify, to look my own son in the eye and condemn him for his crimes. I spent long hours preparing with the prosecutors, going over every detail of my story, and steeling myself for the inevitable attacks from James's defense team. They were a ruthless bunch, known for their ability to twist facts and manipulate emotions to win sympathy for even the most despicable of clients. And when the day of the trial finally arrived, I felt a sense of dread and anticipation churning in my gut. I knew that this was the moment of truth, the point of no return in my relationship with my son and my own sense of integrity. As I took the stand, I could feel the weight of 100 eyes upon me, the courtroom packed with reporters and spectators eager to witness the unfolding drama. But I forced myself to look straight ahead, to focus on the truth that I had come to tell. I spoke of James's childhood, of the love and the care that Eleanor and I had poured into raising him. I spoke of his early promise, his quick mind and his natural charm, and of the pride I had felt in watching him follow in my footsteps and enter the medical profession. But I also spoke of the warning signs that I had missed, the red flags that I had been too blind or too stubborn to see. The way James had always pushed the boundaries, always looked for shortcuts and loopholes. The way he had grown increasingly distant and secretive in recent years, brushing off my concerns and my attempts to connect. And then I spoke of the clinic, of the horrors that I had uncovered in the course of the investigation, the fake prescriptions, the kickbacks, the patients who had been left to suffer and die in the grip of addiction. I spoke of the betrayal I had felt, the sense of shame and anger that had consumed me when I realized the depths of my own son's depravity. Through it all, James sat at the defense table, his face a mask of stone, and his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the courtroom walls. He never once looked at me, never once showed a flicker of remorse or regret for the lives he had destroyed. And when the defense rose to cross-examine me, I braced myself for the onslaught. They came at me with everything they had, trying to paint me as a jealous, controlling father who had driven his son to rebellion with his impossible standards and his unrelenting criticism. They brought up old disputes and long-forgotten grievances, twisting my words and casting doubt on my motives. They even had the audacity to suggest that I was the one who had pushed James into the world of prescription drug dealing, that I had somehow profited from his crimes. But I held my ground, my voice steady, and my gaze unwavering. I would not let them break me, would not let them tarnish the truth that I had risked everything to bring to light. And in the end, the jury saw through their lies and their manipulations. They returned a verdict of guilty on all counts, sending James to prison for a long and well-deserved sentence. I wish I could say that I felt a sense of triumph in that moment, a sense of vindication for all the pain and the heartache that I had endured. But the truth was, I just felt hollow, empty, like a man who had lost everything that mattered in the pursuit of some abstract notion of justice. James was my son, my own flesh and blood, and no matter what he had done, no matter how much he had hurt me and everyone around him, a part of me would always love him, always grieve for the boy he had once been and the man he could have become. But I also knew that I had done the right thing, the only thing that my conscience and my sense of duty would allow. I had stood up for what was right, had fought to protect the vulnerable and the innocent from the scourge of greed and corruption. And in doing so, I had reclaimed a piece of myself that I thought I had lost forever. The part of me that was a healer, a guardian, a man of principle and purpose. It would be a long road ahead, I knew. There would be scars and wounds that might never fully heal all, relationships that might never be mended. But I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to keep fighting for the truth and the light in a world that often seemed so full of darkness, because that was who I was, who I had always been. A man who believed in the power of compassion, the strength of integrity, and the unshakable bond of family. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what demons I had to face, I knew that I would never stop striving to be that man, to live up to the legacy that I had fought so hard to defend. For myself, for my patients, for the son I had lost, and the family I still held dear. I was Dr. Clark Simmons, and I would not be broken. The months following James's conviction were a time of healing and reflection for our family. Eleanor and I clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, finding solace in our shared grief and our unshakable love. We spent long hours talking, crying, and remembering the good times we had shared with our son, the moments of joy and laughter that had once filled our home. We also began to reach out to the families of James's victims, offering our condolences and our support in any way we could. It was a humbling experience, coming face to face with the human cost of our son's crimes. But it was also a powerful reminder of why I had done what I did, why I had risked everything to bring the truth to light. These were real people, with real lives and real dreams that had been shattered by James's greed and callousness. And while nothing could ever undo the harm that he had caused, I was determined to do everything in my power to help them find some measure of peace and healing. I threw myself into advocacy work, partnering with organizations that were fighting to end the opioid epidemic and reform the broken systems that had allowed it to flourish. I gave speeches, wrote articles, and met with lawmakers and policymakers, using my platform and my expertise to push for change at the highest levels of government and industry. It wasn't easy work, and there were times when the opposition seemed insurmountable. The pharmaceutical companies, the lobbying groups, the entrenched interests that profited from the status quo. They all fought tooth and nail to preserve their power and their bottom lines. But I refused to be deterred, refused to let their resistance dampen my resolve. I had seen firsthand the devastation that prescription drug abuse could wreak on individuals, families, and communities. And I was determined to be a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the cause of justice and reform. Through it all, I drew strength from the support of my colleagues and my loved ones. My old friend Dr. Patel became a close ally and confidant, working tirelessly by my side to expose corruption and push for change within the medical establishment. And Eleanor was my constant companion, my source of comfort and inspiration in even the darkest of times. Together, we began to build a new life, one that was centered around service, compassion, and the pursuit of a higher purpose. We volunteered at local clinics and community centers, providing free medical care to those who couldn't afford it. We mentored young doctors and medical students, instilling in them the values of integrity, empathy, and social responsibility. And slowly but surely, we began to heal all, to find a sense of peace and purpose in the wake of our family's tragedy. We knew that we would never forget James, never stop loving him or mourning the man he could have been. But we also knew that we had a choice in how we moved forward, in how we chose to honor his memory and atone for his sins. For me, that choice was clear. I would spend the rest of my days fighting for what was right, for the values and the principles that had guided me throughout my career. I would be a force for good in the world, a beacon of hope and healing in a time of darkness and despair. And I would do it all in the name of my son, the boy I had loved and lost, the man who had taught me the true meaning of sacrifice and redemption. Years passed, and the world began to change around us. New laws were passed, new safeguards put in place to prevent the kind of abuses that James had perpetrated. The opioid epidemic began to recede, thanks in no small part to the tireless efforts of advocates and activists like myself. But there was still so much work to be done, so many battles left to fight. And I knew that I would never stop pushing, never stop striving to make a difference in whatever way I could. Because that was the legacy that I wanted to leave behind. Not the legacy of wealth or power or prestige, but the legacy of a life lived in service to others. The legacy of a man who had faced the darkest of demons and emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to the cause of justice and compassion. And so, as I sat in my study one evening, surrounded by the mementos and the memories of a lifetime in medicine, I felt a sense of peace and purpose wash over me. I knew that I had made mistakes, that I had not always been the father or the husband or the doctor that I wanted to be, but I also knew that I had never stopped trying, never stopped fighting for what I believed in. And in the end, that was all any of us could do. To keep pushing forward, keep striving to be better, to do better, to leave the world a little brighter than we found it. I picked up a framed photo of James, taken on the day he graduated from medical school. He looked so young, so full of promise and potential. And for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine the man he could have become, the life he could have led if things had been different. But then I set the photo back down, my heart full of a bittersweet mix of love and sorrow. The past was gone, and no amount of wishing or regret could change it. All we had was the present, the chance to make a difference in the here and now. And that was exactly what I intended to do. For myself, for my family, and for the countless lives that had been touched by the scourge of addiction and greed. I was Dr. Clark Simmons, and I would not rest until the work was done. It's been 10 years since James was sentenced to prison. 10 years since I took the stand and testified against my own son in the name of justice and truth. So much has changed in that time, both in the world around us and in the quiet corners of my own heart. The opioid epidemic has receded, thanks in no small part to the tireless efforts of advocates and reformers like myself. New laws have been passed, new safeguards put in place to prevent the kind of abuses that James and others like him once perpetrated with impunity. But the scars remain, the wounds that may never fully heal all. I see them in the eyes of the families who lost loved ones to addiction, in the communities that were ravaged by the greed and callousness of a few bad actors. And I feel them in my own soul, the ache of a father who will never stop grieving for the son he lost, the man he could have been. But even amidst the pain and the sorrow, there is hope, there is light. I see it in the faces of the young doctors and medical students I mentor, the ones who have taken up the mantle of compassion and integrity that I have tried to pass down. I see it in the resilience and the courage of those who have battled addiction and come out the other side, stronger and wiser for their struggles. And I feel it in the love and the support of my family, the unshakable bond that has sustained me through the darkest of times. Eleanor is still by my side, my partner and my soulmate in every sense of the word. And together we have built a life that is rich in purpose and meaning, one that honors the values we hold most dear. James is set to be released from prison next year, his debt to society finally paid. I don't know what the future holds for him, for our relationship, or for the long road to redemption that still lies ahead. But I do know that I will be there for him in whatever way I can. Because that is what fathers do, what families do. We love, we forgive, we never give up on each other, no matter how far we may fall. And so, as I sit here in the twilight of my years, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, I feel a sense of peace and gratitude wash over me. I have known great joy and great sorrow, great trials and great trials, but through it all I have tried to live a life of purpose, of service, of unwavering commitment to the principles that define us as healers and as human beings. And in the end, that is all any of us can ask for. To leave this world a little better than we found it, to pass on a legacy of compassion and integrity to those who will come after us. I am Dr. Clark Simmons, and I am proud of the man I have become, the difference I have tried to make. May my story be a reminder to all those who hear it, a reminder that even in the face of great darkness, there is always hope, always the chance to be a force for good in this world. And may we all have the courage and the strength to take up that chance, to be the healers and the helpers that this broken world so desperately needs. For in the end, that is the true measure of a life well lived, and it is a measure that I can only hope to live up to, with every breath I take and every choice I make, until the very end. If you found Dr. Clark Simmons' story of redemption and perseverance inspiring, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales of everyday heroes. And don't forget to share your own experiences and reflections in the comments below. We all have a part to play in making this world a little broader, a little more compassionate. Thank you for being here, for being a force for good in your own lives and communities. And remember, no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always hope, always the chance to make a difference. Keep fighting the good fight, my friends, and never, ever give up on the power of the human spirit to overcome even the greatest of odds. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. The world needs more healers like Dr. Simmons, more everyday heroes like all of you, and together we can build a future that is worthy of our highest aspirations, our deepest dreams, one story at a time, one act of courage and compassion at a time. The journey begins anew with each and every one of us. So let us go forth with open hearts and unshakable resolve, for the best is yet to come.